itself as an island.
Focus. You'd think that the hard work on Square Enix's part was already done, and it probably would be if the game it was remaking was ordinary. However, Final Fantasy VII is no ordinary game, still being held up by many as one of the first JRPGs to ever properly punch through and connect to a Western audience, hence its importance. 2020's Final Fantasy VII Remake proved that this new iteration isn't the exact same story for those who played the 1997 original game either. Now, with Final Fantasy VII Rebirth set to release this February 29th, the race is on to see whether Square Enix has done equal justice to the trilogy's second part, which now features worlds and characters that lay outside of Midgar. This is the kind of mentality with which I went into my second hands-on preview. Previously, having loved the small taste of a wider, more open landscape to explore during my first preview, this time I got to have full reign over the biggest area made playable to me yet in the grasslands. As its name suggests, this is a location full of farms, rivers and other lush scenery to seek out, perfect for exploring on the back of a chocobo. It's still unclear just how many of these open zone areas Final Fantasy VII Rebirth will feature in total, but if the grasslands are anything to go by, we're in for a sizable RPG adventure. In between side quests and areas of interest, orcs and wolves still populate large sections of the world, despite the grasslands being a far more peaceful place than Midgar. So sure, I spent much of my time bumping into these groups of foes, all of whom offered a good excuse to let me get back into the swing of Final Fantasy VII Remake's mix of real-time and turn-based combat. In Rebirth, however, new synergy abilities bring about a deeper level of strategy, especially since I had Red 13 in my party, a character whose nimble moveset, which includes the likes of Sidewinder and Wildfire, is a perfect complement to Cloud's more boisterous Buster Sword swings. The inclusion of optional feats to complete during these bouts, such as preventing enemies from using a certain move or completing a certain number of staggers, meant I always had other things to focus on while managing my party's attacks. In the full game, this will hopefully ensure that constantly running into the local wildlife never gets stale. Less impressive was the rather rote style of optional missions I picked up in my brief time exploring, one of which was to bring a specific type of flower back to the Chocobo Farm's resident produce seller. The grasslands are what I would also call sticky, in the sense that I was never afforded total freedom about where to go and how to get there. The flower quest from Chloe is the perfect example of this, where I rode my chocobo across half the span of the map, only to find that the route was blocked, perhaps until I progressed further along into the main story. Even still, I felt flickers of Final Fantasy XV's restricted traversal here, where a simple ravine couldn't be jumped across as I would in almost any other AAA open world game, like say Horizon Forbidden West. Most of the time I was following paths, a shame considering how Final Fantasy XVI often let you off the leash. Something else that also gave me pause was the inclusion of what are called remnant towers, which, disappointingly, are exactly what they sound like. Once activated, they reveal more things to do across the map by way of cursors and objective markers, although I got the sense they'll be less prevalent than they are in your average Ubisoft game. At least there was no challenge from the one in the grasslands I was able to find, so it was easy to press on and engage with the fun stuff. Speaking of which, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth introduces a fun, in-universe card game called Queen's Blood, which I already got the sense it'd be easy to spend hours in. It's a lane-based setup where you must play different powered cards, claiming each lane as your own so you can build up the most power possible. Each card has what's called a pawn rating, and it's this that when a lane is complete collectively adds up to determine who wins the game. The tutorial I was thrown into made Queen's Blood seem more complex than it ended up being. It was a classic case of learning by doing. My time exploring the grasslands was capped off with a boss fight that I was vastly underpowered for. Knowing this wasn't enough to dissuade me from trying to defeat the mighty, snake-like Midgardsormr, though. It proceeded to promptly slap me and the rest of my party around when we encountered the giant basilisk, which was impressive in terms of scale, and it felt like a true set-piece moment. I'm sure if I had the time to grind out my character's level or input better materia, I'd have stood a better chance at surviving. But being dropped into the preview in this way still showed Final Fantasy VII Rebirth hasn't lost a step when it comes to ginormous boss battles. Finally, in addition to the grasslands, a small slice of my preview focused on Sephiroth and Cloud's origin story during an early job in Nibelheim when the two fellow soldiers were still friends. Sadly, I wasn't permitted to capture this section, but it's available as part of the demo on PS5 now. Anyone familiar with the original Final Fantasy VII will have a good idea of how these events scaling up Mount Nibel play out though. Seeing as it forms the game's opening, I won't spoil much else, but just know that Sephiroth's terror and power were instilled into me right from the very start, and that watching such legendary pre-rendered cutscenes brought up to date was a true thrill. So then, while I have some slight concerns about the breadth of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's more open world, small niggles like Ubisoft-style towers and a lack of full character mobility weren't enough to detract me from what is otherwise shaping up to be a gorgeous landscape to be in. Admittedly, anything would feel refreshing after having spent some 20 hours in the same murky blues of Midgar, but the grasslands and Nibelheim are jam-packed with rich detail, fun things to do and cool characters to meet. The last piece of the puzzle is how Square Enix plans to further warp and adapt the existing Final Fantasy VII narrative, which I've no doubt will be a fun journey to experience, regardless of the direction it takes. So there you have it guys, in terms of our second and final preview thoughts on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Are you excited for the full version of this game to release at the end of this month? Be sure to let me know in the comment section below. And then, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the Mirror Gaming YouTube channel to stay up to date with even more videos like this. Until next time, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.
I can't help but wonder where we'll meet next. So many fascinating possibilities.